the Vaporfly Next% 2 was a great shoe. However, I felt like that design had been around a while since the Vaporfly Elite. Luckily this year with the Vaporfly Next% 3, we get a complete redesign top to bottom with a fresh new look. So how does it compare to V2? Well, I've done a few runs in it and I'm ready to give you my first impressions. Just a quick disclaimer that I bought the shoe with my own money, so all my opinions are my own, like all my videos, but if you do want to pick up a pair, Running Warehouse still has some available. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the specs. So the stack height is the same as the Next% 2 with 40mm in the heel, 32 in the forefoot, 4 and 8mm heel to toe drop. The weight does get reduced now at 6.5 ounces for a men's size 9 with the same price of $250. And I put this in the carbon plated racer category. So let's go ahead and dive in with what's new in the shoe overview. The upper is a very minimal and breathable Flyknit mesh. The midsole uses ZoomX with new convex and concave patterns to help with stability. There is an extra 2mm of ZoomX in the forefoot and the same carbon fiber fly plate sandwiched in between. The outsole rubber thickness gets reduced by 2mm, so now it's a thin waffle-esque outsole in the forefoot and a couple of small patches in the heel. Alright, now let's talk about the fit. So typically in most shoes I'm a size 12, but in all the previous Next%s I've been a 12.5, and those have worked great for me, so I went with a 12.5 in this shoe, and I think that the length fits perfect. Fits similar to the previous ones in that regard. However, the upper in general, I had to play around a lot with. I had to pull the laces to get a better lockdown. Kind of created some bunching here at the bottom of the laces. And I had a little bit of heel slipping as well, so I had to mess around kind of with the ankle, try kind of the runner's loop up there. So it wasn't a great fitting upper overall, but after I did some tweaking, playing around with it, I did get that heel slip to become pretty minimal, if not completely gone. And besides just kind of that bulge at the bottom of the laces, it fit pretty good once you got it adjusted, but you might want to play around with some sizes or play around with the laces if you have the ability to before you purchase them. Let's talk about the ride of the shoe and my overall first impressions. So with this new ZoomX formula and the new cutouts and patterns in the midsole, I found that the ride was a lot smoother and a lot more stable than the previous versions. I thought that in the Next% 2, the heel and the midfoot were really skinny and felt very unstable. This one, with kind of the different patterns going on, the different shapes, it makes it feel a lot more stable. And it does feel a lot softer in the heel as well. Kind of reminds me more of the Alphafly V1 back there. That being said, the extra 2mm of foam in the forefoot and this slightly tweaked ZoomX compound, I think it feels a little livelier, maybe a little bit softer in the forefoot. However, it doesn't take away from those faster efforts like at 10K pace. I thought that the forefoot was still really snappy and had that same responsiveness to it. So I think that this improved stability in the heel and the extra softness back there will be good for marathons in those later stages when you aren't always going to be up on your toes the whole time. So like I mentioned in the fit, the upper isn't my favorite at the moment. I had to really do a ton of messing around with it to finally get it comfortable and a nice lockdown to it. But with that out of the way, it is a really breathable and thin upper. It's not like the stretchy Flyknits that we've had in the past. It's definitely a firmer Flyknit material, but it is super thin, super breathable, so it will be good on those really hot days. And talking about the outsole, I think that the thinner outsole does contribute to that kind of more bouncy feeling in the forefoot. It's not as muted like it was in the previous version where you had the thick rubber in there. However, I do have some durability concerns after just a few runs. I'm already seeing some wear at the toe and on the exposed foam. Alright, now I'm going to do a few quick comparisons to the Vaporfly Next% 3. And the first shoe I'm going to compare it to is the Next% 2. So I've been making some comparisons throughout the video so far, but when they really go head to head, I would say that the midsole is much improved in this version, Like I mentioned, I thought that that heel was super skinny and unstable in V1, so I liked for 10K paces when I was up on my forefoot the whole time, it didn't really bother me. But for marathon races, this was never a consideration for me, just because at the end of it, I'm heel striking. I want something that's going to be a little more stable and a little more soft in the heel. So I do think that the Vaporfly Next% 3 is going to be an option that can range from 10K to full marathon for me, unlike V2. Like I mentioned, just kind of that stable ride and that softer heel makes it much more appealing for those longer distances to me. For the upper though, I really loved the upper on the V2. I had no problems with it. It was one of my favorite on Nike racing shoes, and I've been dissing this upper pretty hard so far, so it's kind of disappointing to go from one I really like to one that needs some work. So that's one trade-off there. But overall, I think it's going to be, if you are going shorter distances, you might be fine sticking with V2, but if you're doing that full marathon, you want something maybe a little more stable, a smidge softer, you might like V3 better. Next up is the Metaspeed Sky Plus from Asics. So I just did my full review on this, and in it, I kind of noted how if you do land further back on your heel, it can be a little bit of an awkward transition just because there is so much built up in that forefoot. This one I don't have that problem with. It's a much smoother heel to toe transition. Like I mentioned, it feels a little more stable on the heel on this one even. I do think that the forefoots feel pretty similar in these two though. I think especially with that extra couple millimeters of foam on V3, it helps with that. I do think it's a little more energetic, kind of maybe a little more bouncy feeling in the V3, but overall I think that these are two great options. This one is one of my favorite for half marathon distance, and I think this one would be a good option for that as well. Next up is the Endorphin Pro 3 from Saucony. This one, when I gave my first impressions video, I said it's a lot softer than the first Endorphin Pros, so it's one that I could see taking towards the marathon, which I agree with still, but this Power Run PB foam is still a little firmer than the Zoom X found in the Vaporfly Next% 3. However, I think they're both great options. This one feels maybe just like it's a little less underfoot, even though I think they're pretty similar stacks. This one feels a little bit softer, a little more cushion underfoot for some reason. And they both have really breathable open mesh uppers, but I had no issues with the fit on the Endorphin Pro 3. No bunching, any heel slip or anything like that, like I have had on the Vaporfly 3. Overall, I think that these two are pretty comparable, but if you want something maybe a little firmer, a tad more responsive, you can go with this one. If you want something just a smidge softer, a little more energetic, go with the Vaporfly Next% 3. And finally, we have Nike's other racing shoe, the Alphafly Next% 2. I think I have a lot to say about these two, so I will save that for a separate video, so make sure to check it out when it drops. So overall, I think that the Vaporfly Next% 3 is a big improvement, especially in the ride and the midsole department. I think that it really makes it more of a marathon racer, in my opinion. I know there's a ton of people that use it for marathons, but it was personally never that for me, so I think that it becomes more versatile now. However, like I've brought up multiple times, the kind of weird fitting upper and some concerns with the durability are two things to watch out for. However, I do have to put a lot more miles on this shoe to give you my final verdict. Subscribe so you don't miss that. And go ahead and let me know in the comments down below if you've tried the Vaporfly Next% 3. Have you seen some of the issues that I've had, or are you planning to pick one up? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep on running.